So I'll clear the board. Okay, next we're going to have the new committee chair, Scott Hansen. We have 2 items, I believe, coming from Standard and Assessment Committee report. Board member or Chair Hansen, are you ready to report?
Ready to go, Chair. Thank you. And it may look like we slacked off at the end of the year, but I promise you that Chair Graviat and Vice Chair Marsh drove us right to the end. We had some heavy items to discuss. But our first motion for the board is the committee moves that the board approve. This is on item 3.2. The committee moves that the board approve the addendum and waiver request to the Utah Consolidated Plan.
Okay, the motion from committee is that the board approve the addendum and waiver request to the Utah Consolidated Plan. Any discussion to the motion? I'm seeing no hands raised, so board members, please vote at this time.
Board member Lear votes aye, Chair.
Okay, thank you. The voting is complete and the motion passes unanimously. So clear the board and please continue.
Next motion relates to item 13.3. The committee moves that the board accept the resolution denouncing racism and embracing equity in Utah schools, draft 2.
Okay, the motion before the board is that from the committee is that the board accept the resolution denouncing racism and embracing equity in Utah schools, draft 2. Discussion to the motion. We've got several hands raised. Board member Hymas.
Yeah, thank you. First off, I do want to comment on this document. It's fantastic. I think it's been very well thought out and put together. I just have a question, and maybe you can answer. And I could be way off here, but at the end of page 1, the final whereas, it talks about disparities in educational programs and outcomes for underserved groups. And I wondered just what those programs are, if we could speak to that.
Okay.
I agree.
I'll look for staff to raise their hand that can speak to that was in that.
Looking for Patty Norman, Dr. Norman.
Yeah.
I am.
Oh, there's Patty.
Deputy Superintendent. Yes, I'm trying to find that exact line on there so I can see which one it says. So it's talking about the programs. Angie, can you scroll to where it says that?
Yeah, it's just the final whereas. Again, I'm not trying to ruffle any feathers. I think that the USBE and all the staff that goes along with it has done an excellent job with our educational programs. I didn't see racism within or disparities within the program. I agree that the outcomes are a little bit off, but just that verbiage.
So you're specifically asking on the last whereas right there, but with hopeful, committed.
On the bottom of page 1, on the first page.
Okay.
There you go, right there.
There we go. Okay, I wasn't seeing what you were saying. Underserved groups, including students of color, exist under our current educational systems. So when we were talking about disparities in educational programs, we were I can't speak on behalf of Access, but I can speak on behalf of kind of what's being talked about within the committee. And during that time, it was talked about what the outcomes are. And I think that there's some backup as well in tomorrow's Standards and Assessment Committee meeting that talks about educational outcomes and what those are. So when we look at the programs and what goes into the program, then there's an assumption being made that we can really support those students in diverse ways so that we have those educational outcomes that do produce those equitable experiences and outcomes for them. So when we talk about the programs, there are federal programs. There's Title III for multilingual learners. There's Title, 9. There's different title programs federally, but then there's also our students who are living in low socioeconomic circumstances and different socioeconomic circumstances. So there's a variety of programs, and then there's also lots of outcomes depending on how we read that data.
Chair
Have a
Huntsman,
follow-up?
yeah, if I could piggyback on Dr. Norman's answer as well.
Okay.
You know, specific programs that come to mind, Board Member Hymas, are things like if you look at a school and 70% of their students are students of color, or maybe 70% of their students are students living in poverty, and yet you look at their AP classes or concurrent classes, are they also reflective of those numbers, or do you see predominantly students who live in middle or upper economic homes with upper economic mobility? Or do you see all white students if 70% of the population are students of color in higher level courses? So it's that kind of programming as well, if you want to get down into the weeds, just making sure that programs in schools and in districts are representative of the students that they serve.
Do you have a follow-up, Board Member Hymas?
No, I just continue to wrap my head around it. Thank you for those replies.
Okay. Board Member Straight?
Yes. A couple questions, or maybe some background. I see this is in the second draft, and then this morning during public comment, there was mention of potential amendments or requests to look at amendments. Are those tied to the fact that it's a second draft? Are those two working together?
This is specifically what came out of committee work. There's always an option or an opportunity for board members to, as something comes out of the committee, to propose that changes if you're adding to or taking away from a document. Right now, that is not on the table. The only thing that's on the table is a motion of draft 2. So that's what we're asking. So there may be some motions coming forward, but they're not on the table right now.
Chair, if I can comment to that, this is draft 2 because there was a draft 1 with this title that was presented in committee meeting, and there were some revisions made to that. That's why we have a draft 2 at the top of the page.
Is this a draft? This is a draft 2. So how come we didn't bring draft 1 out and then propose the draft 2 in a second? What came out of committee, Scott?
Draft 2 was accepted by the committee.
Yes. So that's what's before us. But
That's the reason we have a draft 2 though at the top, because draft 1 was revised in committee and was titled draft 2 and then brought to the board.
Okay. So this is, there could be some added, if board members wanted to add and it was acceptable, amendments to this. So right now it's just draft 2 as shown, that's before the board for consideration. Do you have a follow-up?
Thank you. I was just trying to get some context.
Okay. Board Member Klein?
Okay, so just based on what Matt brought up, just looking at that, and it looks to me like, is there specific programs that we have created that are racist, or would it be better to say that there's disparities in opportunities for these kids? Because obviously we don't want to have programs in our schools that are racist, but I don't think that there are any. Is there any specific ones that you can name that we can address individually?
If I could respond to that, Chair, I think the superintendent also responded, but is it all right for me to speak?
Yes, go ahead.
I think what was discussed, Board Member Klein, in our committee meeting was that the participation in many of our programs doesn't match the demographic makeup of our schools. So there are disparities in educational programs in that regard. Something that needs to be, nothing is saying that those are necessarily racist, but we need to look into, or we have the intent to look into, why those disparities are happening and see if, what would be a good action to take in the future to rectify those.
I think providing equal opportunity is what we're going for. So I'm okay with that. We can't necessarily produce equal outcomes. So that's not something that we can deal with, but that may be something we could look at, changing programs to opportunities, because that's really where, I mean, you just confirmed that, correct?
So the question is this about creating the opportunities or guaranteeing outcomes? Is that what your question is? Board Member Klein?
Well, based on what Scott just said, it sounds like our programs aren't up the problem. It's making sure that there's equal opportunity to participate in those programs, correct? And maybe we could fix the wording to reflect that.
If I can speak, Chair, I think this is a whereas that just recognizes that there are disparities in programs and outcomes for underserved groups. So this isn't stating that, the reasons for those, but there are disparities based on the data that we have. So it's recognizing that, and then at the end, the be it further resolved, and therefore be it resolved. Those state the actions or how the board's going to move forward, or is resolving to move forward.
Board Member Lear?
Thank you. I wanted to say that I listened to this complete discussion in the Standards and Assessment Committee, and I was maybe similar to Board Member Klein. There were some phrases, some words that I would have stated differently, but I do recognize it now as a really strong effort by that committee. And I personally am willing to put aside some specific concerns I had and some specific wording changes I would have personally liked, because I think it's an excellent product of a committee and reflects several diverse viewpoints. So I'm satisfied with the outcome and would support it. I also wanted to add that I very much appreciate the speakers this morning who urged the board to be very earnest and very active in changing what needs to be changed, and not just put the words forward, but actually put our actions behind those words. And I heard those speakers, and I'm extremely appreciative of their efforts and their situations. I know one of them is an elementary school teacher on the west side of Salt Lake. I know that Jenny Gravitt herself works in a lower income junior high school in Weaver District. And so those people are really doing the work that the state board should support and help with. And I just don't want to say because we're not amending this or making every desired change that we're not hearing them. I heard them, and I'm really so appreciate their passion and their intense interest in this, and the fact that they work in that field in very hard jobs. So I support this draft and will vote for it.
Okay. And we still have a couple hands raised. Board Member Hymas?
Yeah, I just wanted to express my gratitude to Board Member Hanson and Superintendent Dixon for kind of speaking this out for me, helping me get there. I do agree there are disparities. That's not to say it is racist or not racist, but there are obvious disparities within some programs. So again, I just wanted to thank you for that clarification, and I appreciate that.
Okay. Thank you. Board Member Klein, your hand's still raised? Oh, okay. Well, we want to pay attention here. So I don't want to pass up on somebody. Can we bring the motion back up on the screen? I'll restate it. Okay, we're going to vote on this, board members. The motion before the board from committee is that the board accept the resolution denouncing racism and embracing equity in Utah schools, draft 2. Board members, at this time, please vote.
Chair, I vote aye. Carol Lear.
Thank you, Board Member Lear. Board Member Hart, I'm not seeing yours vote. voting is complete and the motion passes unanimously. Chair Hansen, I think, do you have anything else you want to add? I think that concludes your work, but.
No, I thank you to the board, and thank you also to our past committee members, Chair Gravitt and Mark Huntsman, or excuse me, Mark Marsh, for their work on
I'll take any credit that I can get here lately.
Okay, that's all we have, Chair.
Okay, thank you.